Hi there, this is Charles Kelly. Now, UK prices are still rising despite all the problems, despite the coronavirus and the economy and all the unemployment. Property prices are still rising and have actually now risen again and now are growing at the fastest growth rate for 5 years. So it's unbelievable how prices are still rising amidst all of these problems. Now, according to the Nationwide Building Society, which is one of the major lenders in the UK, the annual house price growth from year on year, from last year to this year, at the end of October, in October, is now 5.8%. And the average house price in the UK is now £227,000, or just over £826, or thereabouts. And a similar survey by another big lender, one of the biggest, Halifax, shows that on their figures, growth rate is actually running at 7%, 7.3% on the year. This is incredible. And this is partly due to the stamp duty holiday. So for the next 5 months, buyers of properties up to £500,000 will not have to pay in England, Northern Ireland, just England and Northern Ireland, will not have to pay this stamp duty on a purchase. But second home buyers and buy-to-let investors will unfortunately have to stump up the 3% tax grab surcharge on investors, on people that invest for their pension and do something about providing for their retirement. They have to pay the surcharge figures, and that's still a killer on a lot of property deals. But how long will this boom last? Well, as you know, booms are normally followed by bust, boom and bust. They always say boom followed by bust. And this is something that's not escaped the Bank of England. And the Bank of England have released figures showing that home buyer mortgages approvals climbed to a 13-year high in September. In other words, that the amount of mortgage approvals was at the highest rate for 13 years. That's before the last bust. You remember that one? Which is, if you go back to 13 years, it's roughly just before the last boom. So they're a bit worried, and there are fears that the market could be heading for a cliff edge. And I've seen this before when a certain offer was made or a tax break was made and everyone rushed out to buy. I saw this in the 80s, and then when it was taken away, the market sort of just slumped. Sometimes it can be a small thing like that. It can just be a pin that bursts the bubble, and suddenly confidence is lost and people stop buying, and then they all want to sell and there's no buyers there, and then the lenders draw their horns in and stop lending, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, there are people looking at this. BBC reports that the NAEA property markers called for action to avoid a cliff edge drop by extending the deadline and allowing people more time to enjoy this stamp duty holiday, because they fear that if you get into early 2021, early January, February, and it looks like they may not make this deadline, that buyers may pull out. I don't know if that's true. I mean, it will save buyers a couple of £1,000s here or there. Sometimes there's not that much in it. Are they going to pull out of a property purchase just because they won't meet the deadline? I'm sure that solicitors will be busy if this deadline does stay in place. Then solicitors are really going to be busy in March trying to get everything done before this deadline ends. There are other factors. The current sort of furlough scheme comes to an end. It's replaced by a new job support scheme, as I mentioned about a week ago, the Rishi Sunak job support scheme. I don't think it's as generous as the furlough scheme. Could we see unemployment figures rise? Some are predicting it could go up to 3 or 4 million. We don't know. And then we have a second wave of coronavirus, COVID-19, sweeping parts of the country. And every day we hear news that another part of the country has gone into a tier 3 restriction zone, and Scotland and Wales are more or less closing down their economy, and this could stall economic growth, and that means if economic growth stalls, everything, all bets are off really, because if there's not people out there working and able to buy houses, then how is the market going to keep going up? I don't know. I don't know why it seems to be defying all logic why people would be scrambling to buy a house when possibly their job is not even safe. And meanwhile, Rightmove say that house prices in London, and particularly in Zone 1, are falling, whilst prices in the outer suburbs are rising. And this is because a lot of buyers are now saying, well, they want a bit more bang for their buck, and maybe they want a safer environment. And maybe it's because, as was happening in America, a lot of people may start to be permanently based at home or not have to go into the office that much. So why live right near the centre of London in a tiny flat or a studio when you could, for the similar sort of money, you could buy a larger flat or even a house outside of London? And if you haven't got that commute to worry about, then why live right in the centre of town if you don't have to work in the centre of town, particularly if you're starting a family? There's obviously benefits to living in London, but you look around London now, some parts of it look like a ghost town, and so maybe you might see this trend. It's certainly happening in America, where big companies, Google and Facebook and Twitter, are saying to staff, stay at home for the rest of the year. You may not have to come back into the office, and if they do have to come back in the office, maybe it's not going to be this 9 to 5 routine and paying all this money to commute into London. So we could see that big trend happening, and it certainly seems now the Rightmove survey that's been done are based on asking prices, and I'll put this on my blog, moneytipsdaily.com, because it won't translate to the Facebook page, but there is a table there showing that prices asking prices are in Zone 1 have declined by 8%, whereas in Zone 5 and 6 they've risen by 4%, 4.8%. In Zone 4 they've risen by 5.2%, and you can see this decline, rising asking prices as you go further out, and a decline in Zone 1. Having said that, Zone 1 is the very expensive area. I mean, the average asking price in October 2020 in Zone 1 is over 1.2 million, and the average asking price in Zone 6 is just over £500,000. So there's a big difference there. I don't think Zone 1 is going to die, because there'll always be people who want to live right in London. But at those sort of prices, they're hefty prices, and even flats can cost over £1 million in those zones, depending on which part of the zone, obviously. But Zone 2, still the average asking price nearly £750,000, but that's declined by around £20,000. So you can see what's happening. These are only asking prices; they're not sold prices, but you can see the trend that's already happening out there. And as I said, this has been happening in America too. So it's not just in London. So there's a little bit a snippet for you. I think people might even be wanting to escape to the country, like that show where people go out into the country and buy a big farm cottage or something like that to live further out. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens. But there are people saying that that people will never go back to the office in the way we have done in the past. But on the other hand, some offices work better when people are in the office working together. There's that dynamic of people working together. So I don't know. We've got the technology for people to work from home now, but that could also lead to more outsourcing abroad, because if you can put somebody at home in Northampton, then why not in northern India? It could happen, and that could lead to more unemployment. There are companies that are doing well here. Companies that are doing a lot of online retailing. Next reported good figures. China's economy is growing; they're booming again in the third quarter, so they're all right. Give us the virus and then get on with it themselves. So they're doing fine. And even America, that reports that the economy is on the rise again, just in time for the election for Donald Trump. We might think that's a bit contrived, but things are on the move in generally. But this second wave could stall that economic growth, and I fear that we're being pushed into this vaccine. Every day I put on the news, they'd say, well, this vaccine might come in time to save Christmas. So everyone rushes out, I've got to have a vaccine so I can have a few friends round to eat turkey at Christmas. Well, personally, I'm not interested in a vaccine, especially one that's only been tested for a couple of weeks by a couple of universities. No, I'm not going to take a virus until I see what the outcome is for the next vaccine, until I see what the outcome is, because they're supposed to be tested for years, not for a couple of months or a couple of weeks and then launch it on the public. But we shall see what happens there. But at the moment, in Scotland, they're saying, you should get prepared for a digital Christmas, that maybe people won't be able to get together. I don't know. I mean, in other countries, people are, in Rome and in Spain, people are actually on the streets rioting because of these lockdown restrictions, because they see big business crushing the small business and taking away their livelihoods as, more and more small businesses get into trouble. And, if more small businesses get into trouble, that's going to affect shop prices, office prices, everything. And that's why in some countries where they're a bit more vocal and are more likely to go out on the streets and demonstrate, like in Spain, France and Italy, they're out on the streets. It's not really reported very much, but they're out on the streets rioting because they see their jobs and their own small business and their own economy just being crushed by governments and big business. So that's another interesting trend to see. So anyway, I wish you all a great weekend. Thanks for listening. I always appreciate people who tune in on Facebook as well. So it's great to see you, and thanks for listening to me. Thanks to Shirley, Emily there, yeah, and Solar, and people watching from all over the world, even as far as Asia and America. People watch these blogs. So I really appreciate it. And I'm always welcome your comments and your likes as well. And you can also see me on YouTube, and check out my blog as well on moneytipsdaily.com. Thanks for listening, and bye for now. Have a great weekend.